Entrepreneur MBA podcast purpose is to help existing business owners grow their companies past the 10 million in revenue per year benchmark. Here is your host, Stephen Halasnik.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Halasnik. I'm co-founder of Financing Solutions. Financing Solutions for the last 12 years provides easy to set up lines of credit for small businesses. And I will be your host for today's Entrepreneur MBA podcast. I actually do two podcasts. Sometimes I get it screwed up. So this is the Entrepreneur MBA podcast. I also host the nonprofit MBA podcast as well. If you are interested in learning more about a business line of credit for your business, please go to fscreditline.com. Again, FS as in Financing Solutions, creditline.com. Over the last 25 years, I have built 6 companies in the $5 million to $25 million range, including 2 companies that have made the Inc. 500 fastest growing companies in the United States. I love learning from people with business experience. And today, I am excited to be speaking with Dan Mangena from his company. Dan, did I pronounce your last name correctly? Mangena?
It's Mangena. But the E after the G is very deceptive.
I'm sorry.
Sounds like it's to be suffered, but it's the way it is. It's cool.
Well, thanks for joining us. Dan is a successful entrepreneur, a best-selling author, and he's a podcast host of Do It with Dan and Beyond Success, a business transformation coach, and an international public speaker who is known for programs and content that take clients and students to the next level thinking and living. He has been featured on CNN, CBS, Fox, the Jack Canfield Show, and in Forbes and Entrepreneur magazines. Dan, welcome to today's Entrepreneur MBA podcast.
Thank you for having me, Stephen.
So we're going to be talking about today's topic is the DNA of money in your business and life. And I'm excited about today's podcast. It's an interesting topic to look at. I'll be very curious, Dan, into what your take is on the DNA of money in your business and your life. Do you think the DNA in your business and your life versus your life is different?
So if I backtrack a little bit on this, just to give people context of what I mean when I say money DNA. So those watching the video will see I've got chocolate skin, I've got black hair, brown eyes. My son's mother is Russian, so of course she's blonde hair and blue-eyed and definitely not chocolate skinned. And when she fell pregnant, aside from the normal consideration of gender, height, and so on and so forth of what the baby's going to be, then comes in a whole mix of other possibilities as to what the baby's going to look like. Skin tone, hair color, eye color, all of these things basically go up for grabs. And there was at no point during the process of Olga's pregnancy that we poked her belly and said, hey, how's the eye color coming along? How's the hair color coming along? It just naturally unfolded, because anyone with a natural, like a very rudimentary grasp of biology will know that at the point of inception, all of the features of that baby, even up to what he's going to look like when he's 20 years old, were already decided by the DNA makeup at that time. And I think what we often lose sight of is the law of cause and effect as to how it shows up in our life and business, in so much as everything that we're experiencing right now financially, in terms of the quality of our relationships, the quality of our health, the quality of our mental state, is the effect of a number of causations. And those causations, for the most part, are unconscious. Money DNA for me is understanding what I've identified as 5 areas which, when dialed in, allow us to be more predictive as to what our financial situation is going to be, both in our business and in our everyday life.
Okay, good. I like that intro. Let's go back to the original question too. I'm glad you did that. We described, it's really where we should have started, right? Sometimes when I ask a question, the very first one, it's usually to jolt the guest, because usually the guests have been on a lot of different podcasts, and I think one of the values that I've often brought to the table is I ask really good questions. So let's go back to the question I did ask, which I'm glad that you did describe what you're talking about, and then we'll get into the 5 areas you're talking about. Is the DNA of money different when you're talking about your business versus your personal life?
I think that's going to differ from person to person. And that's, I think, one of the things that Money DNA as a concept really puts forward, because it recognizes that we're all individuals. There are some people that will have a different emotional, mental response to the finances in a business, to the finances in the home. There are some people that perhaps have other influences in the home finances. Let's say, for example, you have a couple or a family who are very integrated and they're very open about what they discuss at home. But either of the people in that relationship may have a different perspective in terms of how they deal with their finances in their business. So I think it comes down to the person. And I think it's important for us to recognize that although the core concept of what I'm talking about is going to be the same across the board, how we engage with it and how we respond to things that show up in our life and in our business may be very different from person to person.
Yeah, it is. You know, what's interesting, I noticed this, when I, maybe 5 or 10 years into my first businesses, you know, I'll drop 20 or 30 grand in my business and not even think about it. And then I
Mm-hmm.
go home and I have a renovation for $20,000 or $30,000. And I'm like, oh, that's a lot of money. Right. And, it's just kind of crazy, and I don't even
Mm-hmm.
think about it in the business.
Mm-hmm.
And, I even had this instance happen. My niece just started her first business, and she tends to be very frugal. And
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to her the other day, and she said that she had bought this thing the other day that was $900, and for her that's a huge amount of money. And she
Mm-hmm.
said, "Oh, it was for the business anyway." I was like, whether it's for the business or it's for you, it's still, we're not talking
It's
about her
still
business doesn't have any
spending.
employees. So it's still,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
$900 for her was quite a bit. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, so, so let's talk about the 5 different fundamental, I don't know if I'm sure the right word is, traits that
Pillars.
you're
I call
talking
them
about.
pillars. I call them
Pillars.
pillars
Okay.
is how
So
I
let's talk
describe
about the
them.
5 pillars, the DNA of money.
Mm-hmm. So the first pillar that I look at is the vehicle or the method that we're using to actually engage with money. And that might be the industry that one's in, the way that one delivers goods and services into the marketplace, um, the marketing strategies that one is going to employ, the particular business structure. And I think that just to put this into context, we use different personality profiles in order to map people's money DNA. So for each one of these pillars, there are different personality profiles that we'll use to actually identify and different questions that we'll use to inquire and really understand where someone's optimally placed. Because especially in the world right now of information and social media, there are so many people telling you this is the way that you're supposed to be doing business. This is the thing. Now everyone's saying that you need to be on artificial intelligence. Last year, everyone was supposed to be on Web3 and have their own metaverse thingy jiggy. There's always like a new fad that's going on. And one of the great things about understanding what medium is going to be optimal for you is you can cut out the noise. So for me, for example, when people try and pitch me different things, I can answer very quickly as to whether it's actually aligned with how I operate. So I don't really like doing a lot of detail-y stuff. I'm not an operational person, which we'll look at in pillar 2. I'm very, high level. I'm very good at functioning in terms of coming up with ideas and then organizing people to do more of the execution. So a lot of my entrepreneurial activity tends to be structured around that. When it comes down to different ways of marketing, again, I look at marketing strategies that are aligned with how I best operate so that I can be in more flow. So not only do I get to cut out all of the noise, I can also be more efficient with the allocation of my resources because I can pour them into things that actually work. And it means that I can actually get more out of my time, my energy, and my resources than if I was firing stuff at the wall, hoping that something worked.
Do you think that I often use this characteristic. I come from a family that was very frugal, and I rebelled.
Hmm.
I I was when I was very young, I said, I am never going to want to worry about dollars, pennies, dollars, dimes.
Hmm.
I hated it. My mother would go shopping at 5 different places to save 10 cents on a can of peas, and it would
Hmm.
drive me crazy. So, and I rebelled against that. And I'm more of the um, big picture. Don't worry about the little things. Kind of make the money, and then the little stuff isn't that big a deal. No, I don't spend money like crazy on big things.
You're not frivolous, but you're not frivolous. You're still discerning.
No. But when it comes to, I pay attention to, if I'm going to buy recently I was going to buy a car, and, someone, good friend recommended this car that was $115,000 versus the cars that I'm used to buying are $65,000. I'm like, I'm not spending $115,000 on a car. Right. So when it comes to big purchases, that's a little bit different story. Right. Then I'm a little bit more aware. So my question to you is, somebody who's very, very frugal, I always felt that they hurt themselves if they're, because they won't take chances. So they're less likely, let's say, to start a business. Now, of course, for every rule, there's an exception. So I know, like Sam Walton from Walmart, he was very frugal, but he built a company that was built around being frugal. Right?
Yeah.
So do you think that someone's attitude toward money can hold them back?
I think we're sliding off to another conversation that I love to have. I've actually got, a quiz that we've actually created. It's like 10 questions. It helps people identify their number one block to calling in abundance. And this is actually one of the areas that we find people kind of slipping into. And that's losing sight of the fact that the attitude that I've got towards a thing is going to indicate my relationship to it. Because there is someone that could, and I know people like this, they may be the frugal person that starts a business, but they spend all their time counting the pennies. Do they even get to enjoy it? And as well as I do, having started as many businesses as you have over such a long entrepreneurial career, it's not easy. And so you put all this energy and effort into something and you don't even get to enjoy the benefits of it. And I think it's important to understand that if you're going to be frugal, ask yourself why. Is it fear that's driving your frugality? And if in which case, well, what unconsciously you're allowing into your experience potentially by having those fears? If it's just being careful, fine. I know some people that are happily frugal. It's not that they're having a negative experience. They just enjoy the process of frugality, hunting for the discounts and so on and so forth. I personally never ask for discounts. I never look for the cheapest option. I look for the option that's most convenient and the one that brings me the most joy. So, going back to your car example, I wouldn't spend money on a car just because it's 115,000. I wouldn't be looking at the price. I'd be looking at which one do I want more. And if it happened to be the 115,000 car, I'd buy the 115,000 car. But the attitude that we have towards a thing, I think ultimately, to tie this all up, impacts our relationship to it. And if we're going through all of this effort and efforting in order to create businesses, to create value, and to have this abundance available to us to enjoy, I think it's important for us to have a personal relationship to what that enjoyment means. If you enjoy the process of frugality and hunting for discounts and clipping coupons, have at it. But if it's pulling away from your actual ability to enjoy what you've created, then I would question it.
Is one of the 5 pillars your attitude toward money, or no?
No, the attitude towards money is going to pull from those 5 pillars. So I can look at.
So do you have to understand your attitude of money before you start looking at the 5 pillars?
I would say that your relationship to the pillars is going to give me a clue as to what your attitude is. And if you want to tweak your attitude, then a couple of the pillars will support you in tweaking your attitude to money.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying too. I think it's very important to understand your attitude toward money. I mean, I have my one sister who's wealthy, right? But they're so cheap. And when I ask her why she's so, I'm cutting to the simplifying it, why she's so cheap, she says, well, because that's what I was taught, and I don't want to get my mom or dad who are passed angry. I was like, they're gone. And they, so, anyway, so, all right, so let's go into, but just not to belabor this point, but when you look at my son, who's 22 years old, who's really, really advanced, very mature, he believes that he'll never make the amount of money that I make, and so he feels that he needs to save money because that's the way he's going to, get to this angle of having a good quality of life. when he gets older. And
Mm,
so he knows his why. And I think that's what we're talking
mhm.
about. So what's the second? What were you going to say? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
No, I was going to say, I mean, with that, I would always encourage anyone who is sitting on an axiom about how an activity today is going to lead to wealth in the future should look at the data points. And the data points suggest that saving is not a constructive way to move forward unless you're deploying that saved
Yeah. Well, he's
money as
investing it.
capital towards something. Oh,
He
then
is.
he's
Yeah. So
he's
he
away.
saves
He's away to the
30%
races
of
then.
yeah. He saves, he does, he's a 22-year-old kid. He makes $145,000 a year, and he saves 30% of his money. And that
Mhm.
30%, he has his own budget, and 30% of that money goes into the stock market. And he has a long-term plan. By the time he's 50, he wants to retire. So, I mean,
Excellent.
like,
He's got it.
yeah,
He knows what he's doing then.
for a young boy, that's a very mature,
I love
and
that.
yeah. Anyway, and the reason why he picked 50 because he wants to be a professional actor. So he said
Okay, there you
50,
go.
and there he goes. So he has an incentive. Anyway,
Awesome, awesome.
all right. So what's the second pillar?
The second pillar is the role that we actually play in the day-to-day activities. So for me, I don't touch my diary. And this gets annoying for some people because I always have to bring my assistant in. But I mess my diary up. Anytime I try to get involved in arranging my schedule, I'll double book, I'll mess something up. I don't do it. I get an email from Amy on a Sunday. These are the days and times that you've got things. I can check it against my diary as well, make sure everything's there. I
When you
I've
say
got the top level of
diary, you mean it. You mean your
my schedule.
calendar. Your
Yeah, my
schedule.
calendar.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sorry. Forgot to
Yeah.
Americanize it. But
Yeah.
with the operations of the business, the day-to-day operations, I don't do any of the day-to-day operations in any of my entrepreneurial activities. Why? Because I'm not an operational person. That's not where my skills are. My skills are coming up with the ideas to some level, a high level of networking and relationship building and coming up with the future plans. I'm more of a visioner than I'm an executor. And then you get people who are, whether it's from being frugal or because they fear that they don't have any other way to do it, they're trying to wear all of the hats in their business or in their life. And actually, they're doing themselves and their business and the people they serve a disservice because they don't have the skills to run all of them, wear all of those hats. And so it's understanding which hat must I wear, which hats do I wear best, and which hats should I not be wearing, and whether we use partnership, whether we use contracting, whether we use um, uh, interns if we don't have the money to do it, or find some other way to put those hats on the heads of people that actually know what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, as long as I've been in business too, you still sometimes fall into the old thinking that I'm struggling with a little bit with that right now. I've always been pretty good at delegating, but
Hmm.
I'm kind of falling back where I'd be like, oh, I have the time, I'll just do it myself, instead
Hmm.
of finding something else to do with my time. So that's
Hmm.
smart. It's hard to be disciplined, I think, sometimes though. Sometimes
Hmm.
I find, and I don't know if you feel this way. Sometimes I find, oh, by the time I teach this, I also just do it myself. And I'm normally not that way, but I have
Hmm.
a lot more time now, so I kind
Hmm.
of can do that.
End up doing it.
Have you always
It
been that way?
depends. I mean, so the first book I ever wrote was From Time to Time, and it was actually a book that talks about outsourcing and strategies for you to work out what you should be outsourcing and how you can afford outsourcing and make it more practical. But yeah, for complicated tasks, there may be an onboarding period where you have to teach someone. But I always ask people, what's the opportunity cost of you continuing to do it yourself
I
versus
get it.
going through the pain of the short term teaching someone and then not having to do it? So what we're very, very actively do in all of the areas of all the businesses I do is make sure we set up SOPs, standard operating procedures. So when I am teaching someone, we're recording it and we're documenting it to make sure that it's easier then to create step-by-step things that we can pass off to somebody else to continue going forward. And yeah, it is painful at first to do that, but I look at the longer term benefit of having that freedom. And in terms of what you were saying about, not knowing what to do with one's time, I think it is important to have some intentionality of what that time is going to be for. And I think that comes down to being a bit more purposeful. I don't like people getting obsessed with purpose. Oh my God, what did God put me here to do? What did the universe want from me? Because a lot of people get stuck not doing anything, waiting for that big bang to happen. But I certainly know that for me, the next 3 to 5 years, I want to be a full-time philanthropist. And so when I have extra time, my son is only 2, I'll maybe spend time with my son, although I'm away from him at the moment. I've got hobbies. I've been working on improving my chess game. I was working out at the gym today, getting my guitar game up. I practice languages. I do some reading. So I fill the time with productive things that are improving me as a person. so that I don't have the thing of, oh, I've got this free time. I've got time that I can use productively. Is it more productive for me to be sabotaging myself for the future, keeping me locked in, needing to do this task going forward, or, creating space so that I can do some of these other things instead?
Good. So let's go to pillar number 3. But before we go to pillar number 3, what's the sentence or one word with what pillar number 1 was?
Vehicle. It's the vehicle.
Vehicle. Number 2,
Yeah.
2 pillar was what?
The role.
The role. Okay.
ROLE, the role that we play.
Role. Now, what's the third pillar?
Internal communication. And what this really comes down to is understanding that, we may have these grand ideas about wanting to change our attitude to money, wanting to change our attitude towards needing to hold on to things and to control, needing to change our attitudes towards being caught up with, whatever the new fad is, and be a bit more focused and disciplined. But one of the things that I've found is so many people are trying to generate these new thinking patterns, but they're not actually speaking in the language that their mind understands. As I mentioned before, we use personality profiles in order to map out these pillars. And the one that we use for pillar 3 is Gary Chapman's model of the love languages, the 5 love languages. So when I start talking about the 5 love languages, people often get a bit confused. They're like, Dan, I'm not trying to improve my marriage here. I'm trying to sort out my business and get my business to the next level. And then I break down where that came from. So for those who are not familiar with Gary Chapman's model, he basically has identified that we as humans generally will primarily communicate the language of love or the message of love to a loved one and receive it via one of 5 modes. Acts of service, as in when someone does something for us, we feel the love. Gifts, when someone thoughtfully gives us a gift, we feel the love. Physical touch, when someone gives us a hug or they give us a kiss, we feel the love. Words of affirmation, when they tell us that they love us, we feel the love. And quality time, when they spend time with us, that's when we feel loving energy. Now, the part that made this very interesting for me, Stephen, was at no point during a communication with someone of this love where there's a disconnect do you sit and say, my love language is words of affirmation. That person actually just tried to give me a kiss and didn't actually tell me how they felt about me. I refuse to feel love in this situation. I do not feel love. We don't have that consciously. At the unconscious level, we have the input of something from someone. We process it and either connect it with the output of feeling love or we don't. And so what we see here is that the love language gives us an inroad to understanding how can we communicate a message to our unconscious mind that will actually generate the output that we want. Why is this important? Because as much as 97% of the time, many of us are operating at the unconscious level. The unconscious mind operates at 10,000 to 10 million times the speed of the conscious mind. No matter what we're trying to do consciously, as in we're actively aware and mentally aware, what's going on there in the unconscious is going to rule the day. So if we do have a new behavior, a new idea, a new thought pattern, a new way of doing things that we need to communicate to ourselves, we can actually use the love language as a way of understanding how best to drop that new message, that new behavior, that new idea into the unconscious mind to get the idea, to get the output that we want.
I want to ask this question now, not wait to the end because I might forget the question because I think it's a good question. And that is, at what point in your life do you think it is the best time to really understand these 5 pillars and your attitude toward money?
I think as early as possible. I mean, my stepdaughter's 7, coming on 8. And even with her, I seek to encourage her to have an expansive, abundant approach to money. Not frivolous, not thinking that money falls out of the sky, but having a conscious relationship to it that has almost an expectation that things are going to work out, but then a dedication to doing the things to make it work out. I do that through example, through conversation, through spending time with her, so on and so forth. I do the same thing with my nephews and nieces because I want them to have that foundation. Because, the people that end up getting into mounts and mounts of consumer debt is because they don't have a conscious relationship to it, right? The people that end up maybe having resources and not enjoying them and having a depressing, unfulfilled life are the people that haven't actually tapped into it. So I think as soon as possible, and if someone's older in life or whatever, today, right? Let's say yesterday is the best time, and the second best time is now, in order to start understanding this and moving forward, because there are benefits to having a conscious relationship, an expansive relationship to the thing that actually makes life the easiest. Money is the easiest medium of exchange. It's the easiest way to get more choice, the easiest way to get more of the things that we want, even if that's that you want to give more money to other people. Charities spend their time trying to get money from people who have made their money. So what if charities were making money themselves, or the people that were in charities had resources? And so I think it's important to look at the best time yesterday and the second best time right now.
Yeah, I was just thinking back, like, so I have a 22-year-old and a 14-year-old boy, both boys. And so I was thinking while you were going over what you're talking about, where did Michael, that's my oldest, get his idea about putting money aside um, you know, and I think it was definitely conversations that we've had, he and I, where I don't like telling my kids what they have to do. I don't like
Hmm.
that. I never did that with anybody who was working for me either. So I think what happened was we would just have intellectual discussions about, money, life, you know, business,
Hmm.
and Michael kind of, I would give him the various different options that somebody can look at their money or their life or their career, and then he chose what what he wanted.
Hmm.
Um, like, I'll be specific. Like I said to him, listen, my first 8.5 years, I worked for Xerox, and I loved working for Xerox. I did really well, and I said to him, if I had stayed in corporate America, I I probably would have done very, very well. I mean,
Hmm.
financially, and I said, but I would have had a different attitude, which was I would have need to have put money away or had passive income somewhere.
Hmm.
And I said probably I would have gotten stock options and all this other stuff.
Hmm.
And I think he looked at the directions that he could do. Could he go into his own business, and what were the
Hmm.
advantages and disadvantages of that? Or could he, stay in corporate America? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of that? And
Hmm.
he kind of made this decision that he wanted to, which I talked to him about. Money gives you control and options for your future,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? And I said,
Hmm.
the people who run into trouble are the ones that live paycheck to paycheck. Then you have no
Yeah.
options,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
anyway,
wage slavery.
yeah, I mean, yeah. Intellectually, we would have these conversations, and then he came up with his own strategy, right? So I
Mm.
agree with what you're saying, Dan, about having these conversations about money with your kids early on. And I'm not gonna. I don't think it's a good idea to tell them the way that they should have to do things. I think
But to
their
to
personalities
give
might
them the
just,
options for how to
yeah,
think
because they
about
might
it, right?
rebel.
To expand them. Yeah.
Yeah, they might. Just like I
Hmm.
did. I mean, my mom
Hmm.
said, "Oh, you're spending too much money on this," or something like that. I'd be like,
Hmm.
I'm going to rebel the other way.
I mean,
Anyway,
I dialogue. For me, it's about dialoguing. And so, with Ariana, she's older now. So it's like we have discussions about things. So if she wants something, it's like, okay, well, do you know how much that is? Do you know how many, like, just have her thinking about it, just to open up her mind and have her analyzing and being a bit more curious about what's going on, but doing it in a way that's leaning towards abundance rather than, hey, do you know how much money that is? Oh, you can't spend that much money. It's like, oh, do you really want it? Do you know where money comes from? Do you want what money is? This is money. Do you know how much this is? So, if we go to the store, for example, I would give her the physical note. We're out down in Mexico. Okay, you go and have a look, and this is your budget. Go and have a look at what you want and start having. So it's just developing this curious, almost playful, gamified approach to it, and then yes, giving those options for her to decide for herself. And I think with your son, I think it's a testament to the fact that you actually, I mean, deferred gratification is one of the greatest skills for success in life as a whole, right? And the fact that he's made this choice at such a young age to defer gratification for the fullness of his salary, which is probably going to go up depending on what career he's gone in, and he's saying I've made this commitment, and he's actively made the steps towards that commitment for 28 years. It's a long time in the future. I'm going to defer my gratification for the next 28 years and pop this aside. It's a very, very powerful life skill. And I think, if nothing else, even if everything went to pants with the stock market, the fact that he has that skill that's very, very transferable and will always set him ahead. So I just wanted
yeah.
to
Well,
basically give a good shout out for that.
but I always try to help my kids or prepare them. I believe that's my job, right, is
Mm-hmm.
preparing my kids for what's coming down. Like, not to belabor the point. Like an example would be is I've talked with him quite recently a lot about, he's only been in his job for a year, right, and what happens with layoffs,
Mm-hmm.
right? So because
Mm-hmm.
in corporate America, that's what
It
happens.
happens.
You get
Yeah.
laid off,
Yeah.
So we talk about those conversations. So introducing, these ideas and concepts with my kids I've always done that from a very young age. So anyway, let's go to the fourth pillar.
Yeah. Let's go to the fourth pillar. So the fourth pillar, quite quickly, is decisions. And I think we lose sight of the fact that a lot of the times the decisions that we're making that we're not conscious of are running through the unconscious programs that have led us to the results we've been getting now. So if we want to make different choices, we need to make those choices in a different way. And what we do with this one is we use particular personality profiles to understand how people can make choices that they can be conscious of that aren't running purely on program, but they can be more connected to. And there are different ways, depending on a couple of profiles, that we can show you how to make choices that aren't held back by limiting beliefs, by limiting ideas, and limiting behaviors.
Yeah, I mean, how do you feel like in business that rule even applies even more because you're making an investment in the business? So
Mm-hmm.
you want to make sure that you say, hey, if I'm going to, I see it all the time in people. My skill set is marketing. So that's where I'm really
Mm-hmm.
good at. Um, I am always um, an advocate of saying to people, you have to um, measure everything. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to spend $10,000 on Google advertising and then see what happens. And then you got to measure everything. You got to, how many of them convert to clients? And, it's not an
Mm-hmm.
easy thing to really kind of figure out, believe me. So so is the fourth pillar um, very, very applicable to business and personal life?
Yeah, it's how we make all choices and decisions, because all of our choices and decisions, if left unconscious, will be unconsciously driven. And therefore, again, you know, cause and effect. Right now, we're experiencing the effect of the causation of choices that we've made before. Everything that's in our life now, we can tie back to a choice to do something or not to do something, to be somewhere, to not be somewhere. If we continue to make choices unconsciously, we're going to be making the same choices and end up in the same place. There's not going to be any change. Your financial situation, your relationship situation, your health situation, your family situation, it will remain the same. So we have to change how those decisions are being made, reframe that so that it's not being led by unconscious programs, and then move forward positively to the new direction we want to move into.
Yeah, and I say this too, that it's really important for you to have KPIs, key performance indicators, and
Mm-hmm.
that you review those every single month. And for a business, it's how much revenue did we make, or sales? What was our gross profit? What was our net profit? What did we spend on marketing versus our sales? I'm just going over the things that I look at all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I do this? What was the top 10% of expenses that we had?
Mm-hmm.
These are all things that I look at and that I, pay attention to. And there's other ones, turns on receivables. In my
Mm-hmm.
personal life, looking at our biggest expenses, our balances at the end of the month, where do we, all these other areas. So I think I'm a big believer, and talking about pillar number 4 is about also starting off with awareness of you don't you got to understand where cash flow is going, whether it's personal or
Mm-hmm.
business, right? And I
Definitely.
think that in itself, I'm not a good person with budgets, so
Mm-hmm.
but I am. If I'm made aware of things, then I think I subconsciously have a budget in my head. So,
I'm with you.
um, you
But
agree
this
with
goes
that?
back to the role, though, Stephen, right? Your role isn't to be the detailed, numbered, point to point budget person. We
Yep.
have a bookkeeper, and we've got an internal financial officer that does that, make sure that the bills are paid on time, and so on and so forth. I just get a list of them to sign off and confirm that these are the payments to be made, and that's it. I don't have to deal with all the rigmarole, because if it did, we get into trouble.
Well, I
Nothing
think
would be paid on time if it
yeah,
did.
I
Yeah.
also think it's a mistake. I think going back to my original discussion earlier, if someone's, very frugal, I think you Listen, I think it depends on the business. Like I said, the example of
Mm-hmm.
Sam Walton, right? So I think it depends on the business. There's some businesses that are very much geared toward frugality, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then there's other businesses like anything that's certainly in the financial industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have people who are incredibly frugal running huge mutual fund companies, right? They
Probably not.
just you don't see it. They're thinking, we're big, right? Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
so what's the fifth pillar?
Fifth pillar is all about action, because at the end of the day, we can have all the theory in the world. If we're not actually taking the actions, then we're not gonna, we're not going to get anywhere. And for that one, we use Gretchen Rubin's model of the four tendencies. Gretchen Rubin's an awesome researcher. She's based out of New York. She did a great book called The Happiness Factor. And I heard her on the Tony Robbins podcast years ago. I followed her work and really, really loved this model, because what it does is it looks at putting us into four groups depending on how we deal with expectation internally and externally. What that literally means is, how do I respond to what I say I'm going to do? And how do I respond to what other people are expecting me to do? So the four groups are rebels. They resist internal and external expectation. So if they want to do something themselves, they're going to procrastinate and self-sabotage. If someone wants them to do it, they're going to rebel against it. You've got questioners. Questioners will rebel against both unless they really understand and agree with the why. If they agree with the why, then they'll do it. And if they don't, they'll resist. Then you have obligers, which can only respond to external. If they have to do it in and of themselves, they won't do it. If they don't have an external accountability, it won't happen. Then you've got upholders that respond positively to internal and external. And so one of the really funny things is, there are a lot of people, for example, that are following this edict of saying that they should have an accountability partner. They should have a coach telling them what to do. They should have someone looking over their shoulder. And actually, that's going to create more resistance. It's not going to be positive for them. I'm one of those people. I need to structure that support very, very specifically to me. Then you've got people like upholders, where you would think it's great that they always do what they say they're going to do. But no, because they end up burning out or taking on too much or doing things that don't matter, because they say, they follow through with everything that they're going to do. So they need to be a lot more discerning. And there are some people for whom success is just an accountability partner away. And so if they would just take on some accountability, maybe being in a community, having an accountability partner that doesn't have to be paid, it can be someone that holds you accountable in any way, shape, or form, they will get to the end goal. But if you don't know that, you're not going to be able to take the action. You're always going to find yourself stuck.
Great. That's good. So let's restate, Dan, please, for me, the 5 pillars that we should be paying
Yes.
attention to.
Number 1 is the vehicle, how we are actually doing the thing. Number 2 is the role, what we're doing actively with our time and energy in the doing of the thing. 3 is internal communication. How are we speaking to ourselves and to others in order to ensure that we're actually taking the actions internally to do what we want, where we get to where we want to get to. Number 4 is, how do we make new choices so we can get to new outcomes and do those without being limited? And number 5, how can we be supported to actually take the action that's going to get us to where we want to go?
What came to my mind is, I think you could take those 5 steps and say, what's the DNA of my life?
Mm-hmm.
And then also say, you can also say, what's the DNA of my business as well?
You can.
And kind of break it down that way. Now, the thing that's interesting with money is it crosses the barriers of all those things. Mm-hmm. And listen, I'm 58 years old, and I know that the newer generation, they like integrating life. They believe in integration of life and business, whereas when I was younger, it was they were separate. Business was your business life was your business life. Your personal life was your personal life, and there wasn't really an intertwining. And that's changed a lot over the years. I don't really, I don't know. I don't think it's for the better. I think that there's more burnout now because of that. But I think you could take those 5 pillars and really think through how they would apply to your life and also the business. What do you think about that idea?
Yeah. So the thing for me, Stephen, is that, I didn't start off the work that I do in the world from the personal development perspective with money. I actually just wanted people to create the life that they wanted to live. But what I was finding time and time again, and then when I first started doing this work 5 or 6 years ago, was money was the number one excuse people had for why they weren't living the life that they wanted to live. So tracking it through money, this is something that's measurable. When someone comes to me and they want to get their business up to the next level, they want to get their finances to the next level, they want to be financially free, and we use the money DNA to get there, now we've got a measurable way to track how we're making choices, which will impact our health and our relationship, how we're taking actions, which is going to impact, our finances and our health, internal communication. It's going to, have a say in how we feel internally and how we're moving through life. The roles and the vehicle, how I'm allocating my energy. Am I doing it productively? So it then becomes something that crosses over into every area. We just use money as a way that we can start to keep score, see the result, and then have a positive relationship to it, and then start to expand it into other areas.
Yeah, what's interesting is I've mentioned on my podcast before, like I belong to a group of guys, 9 guys who all own their own businesses. We've been together for 25 years. And when we first started together as a group, we went around a room and said, why did we start our businesses? The number one reason across the board was control. It wasn't money. It was, I want to be able to work on what I want to work on, and I don't want to be told what to do. Mm-hmm. So you would think that people starting their own businesses are saying, oh, I just want to make as much money as I possibly can. Now, granted, that was second. Okay. But,
of course.
And you certainly could say the control factor that we all said money was the vehicle for that control. Right. Yeah. But I think it is a revelation, the idea that when people start their businesses, they have a business because they want control over their life. They want control over the decisions they make. They want control over their time. I guess they want control over their money. It's all about this, because there's nothing worse than working for a corporation where almost everything is out of your control. It's scary. And I definitely, people always say, well, it's so risky for you to go in business. I say to them, to me, it's more risky to work for somebody else. Yeah. So
agreed. I love it.
Last question, are there times when those 5 pillar rules just really break down? Like when you have someone who's super, super wealthy, a billionaire, you think those 5 pillar rules break down?
I don't see why they wouldn't. And I would actually hazard a guess that someone who has got to the point where they've made billions probably is in a vehicle that's aligned with them. If they're happy, they're probably doing the role that's most aligned for them, but not all of them are. If they've got the internal communication locked down, they probably have healthy relationship with themselves and with the people around them. If they're making decisions, they probably have more peace of mind on the day-to-day basis. And then if they're taking action, I think the action probably is. For example, I get to spend time once a year on Sir Richard Branson's island. For those who don't know who that is, he started the Virgin brand of companies. And it was fascinating. I know a few wealthy people, but he's probably the richest person that I have any kind of relationship with, that I get to spend personal quality time with. And he spends half his day having fun. Very clear on what he wants to do with his life. Very, very purposeful with how he contributes to the world and to the businesses that he creates. And he, for me, is an example of someone who is very much in flow. He has great relationships with his family, with his kids. His grandkids adore him. His staff all love him. He's just a very, very awesome person. Is everybody that way? No. I know some very rich people that aren't very happy. They're quite miserable, in fact. So I would say that they're not in alignment with it. So I'd say these principles, I think, do have a place to at least be explored for all of us. And I think that many of us are where we are, which is the whole point of this, because we're already in alignment with these pillars. But there's definitely something to be said for diving in and making sure that we're conscious of where that alignment exists and where it doesn't exist.
Yeah, you know what I wrote down? I like what you said. I said, how can you have more fun? So, I'm in a major, I don't want to get into the details, but a life-changing situation right now. So I'm really questioning a lot of things. And that was, I think you can use those 5 pillars that we talked about to really quantify that money is about how can you have more fun, even if it's through delayed gratification, like you said. So really good discussion. I thought it was going to be very interesting. It certainly was.
Enjoyed it.
That's kind of all the time we have today, but I'd like to thank so very much Dan for coming on to today's podcast. And if you like today's podcast, please feel free to share it with a friend and also subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. And also, please, if you like today's podcast or any other ones, please give us a 5-star review. And if you're looking for a line of credit for your business, you can call us at 862-207-4118 or visit our website at fscreditline.com. Again, at FS as in Financing Solutions, creditline.com. Dan, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
Easiest way to do that is to head to my website, DreamWithDan.com. DreamWithDan.com.
Great. Well, thanks for coming on.
Thank you again for having me, Stephen. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think the thing that on the summary of today that I would take away, and listen, I know it's hard. I know we're all running around with our heads cut off, but having an intentional life, having an intentional business, I think it ends up in that more happiness overall. I'm not saying you have to be so structured that everything you do is intentional, but I think if you take a step back and you think more about what you want out of your life, out of your business, how money plays an effect on those decisions, I think you're going to be happier. I know I've done a nice job with being intentional, and it's I really notice that I'm a lot different than a lot of my friends in that I think things through and I really think what's going to make me happy. So something for everybody to consider, to think about. Take some time back, listen to what Dan's saying, maybe look at those 5 pillars and see how you can apply to your life. Everybody have a great day.